Today we have CEO and Chairman and CEO of RippleNami, and she was also a TEDx speaker recently in San Diego. And I will try to do justice with her background, but I will pass it on to her in terms of diving more deeper. But in summary, she is a multiple C-level executive. Today, she is working as a chairman and CEO at RippleNami, which is, if I just do it justice, is basically digitizing its government in this case, or the infrastructure piece. And it's very exciting. I had the opportunity to discuss some of the stuff with her early on, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't know about this. This needs to be on the pod. Um, so that being the introduction, I want to pass it to Jay. So her name is Jaye Connolly. Am I pronouncing your last name right?
Connolly, yes.
Connolly. Okay. So over to you, Jay. A little bit
Great.
about yourself because you have so much going on. So yeah.
It's called age. I'm old. Hi, and I thank you for having me on your podcast. So I have a checkered past, if you will. Growing up in Texas, I have an oil and gas and mining background, and then moved to the great state of California, where I went into healthcare and mainly mergers and acquisitions, rolling up very big companies such as LabCorp in about 7 different sectors of healthcare. And then from healthcare, I merged into technology and had one of the first AI companies in technology in the early 2000s, where we merged healthcare and tech. And we deployed AI to help on billing, medical billing, and eventually sold that to United Health. So it's the core of all their systems. From there, I went into another 4 technology companies as
Mhm.
CEO and turning them around and fixing them, et cetera. It landed me here at RippleNami 5 companies later and in Africa. So for the
Mhm.
last 10 years, we've been working in Africa with the presidents to deploy technology that helps them become sovereign nations and solve critical issues. And I'll give you a couple examples.
Mhm.
In Uganda, one of their problems is underdeclared property related taxation. And if you think about it, what Africans invest in, they don't put money in banks. They don't really trust banks. They don't, mortgage rates are 30%, so they don't really put money towards like interest rates and mortgage interest rates. They use cash for everything.
Mhm.
So they'll invest in property, they'll invest in agriculture, and they'll invest in livestock. Those are the 3 big areas of investments that Africans invest in. So we then decided to build traceability and transparency systems for each one of those ecosystems. So let's start with taxation.
Mhm.
Think of we built a Zillow for taxation
Yeah.
because over the decades, they've been very good at hiding the property. Where is the property? Who owns it? Is it being rented or not? The whole, it's a shell game. And we built a whole technology that then traces it from pulling in 10 different ministries of data that all have a little something to do with property, pull
Mhm.
it together, match it, visualize it on data visualization, use AI to determine who's under declaring and where does the tax authority need to focus on, implementing Google Street View so they can do everything via desktop. And from there, we've gone, I think, 5x in the last 5x on revenue over the last 4 years just in Uganda. And that's life changing revenue being collected to reduce debt and to increase the middle income. So that's one of the applications. Another one is for climate, because as we know, climate is not been traceable or transparent
Yeah.
lately. So we're doing that from the beginning when a project developer comes into a company or a country, all the way through to the project ends to make sure all the monies go to the people they say, because that is a big issue right now. And then the third piece was livestock and agriculture. So we do everything from food security, traceability to livestock traceability. And it's all about tracing the animal or the crop from beginning to end
Mhm.
to so you get assurance and healthcare records and everything else that you need in order to be able to export your food or your livestock. So that's what we've been doing in Africa for the last 10 years.
And there's a lot to unpack, and we did discuss that we'll have a separate pod on the carbon credits
Mm-hmm.
aspect of it. You told me about that. So let's dive a little bit more deeper. For those who are not familiar, like I'll be very honest, I assumed a lot of things that Africa will have as a continent. You would expect some things. When I think of South Africa, I'm thinking of, a country equal or better than Pakistan, where I'm originally from.
Mhm.
And there are multiple countries in, Africa. You have Ghana, Uganda, and so forth, right? And you're specifically operating in Uganda today, or you're also in multiple countries? I never asked you that.
We're about 30 countries.
Wow. So
Mhm.
can you tell me what did they have before RippleNami wasn't there? Like,
Yeah.
because where you're operating, like you're tracing things, you're making sure there's a structure around taxation, livestock. Some of us will all be like, oh, it should be there. Why is it not there? Oh, why they're not investing in properties? Wait, why is the mortgage like 30% or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Can you like give more background on that? What has set that premise, number one? So, and then we can dive into the follow-up with that.
Sure. So let me start with Africa size. First off, there's 1.5 billion people that live within 54 countries. And by 2030, they will have the largest workforce in the world because 50% of their population is under 16 years old. So it's a giant continent. It's the second largest in the world next to Asia. And it also contains Earth's second lung next to the Amazon. So it's rich in natural resources. It's rich in mining. It's rich in rare earth minerals. It's a very rich country. So they've been independent. Most colonies, most African countries, except I think one, were colonized by Europe,
Hmm.
and they became independent about 60 years ago. So think about America or Pakistan when you're 60
Yeah.
years new, if you will. So I will say what I applaud Africa for across all nations. They didn't have legacy technology systems, ICT systems. They didn't have landlines. They didn't have floppy disks. They didn't have all the legacy ICT that we have in America that holds us back. And we
Yeah.
try to be better, bigger, faster, but we can't because they're like, oh, we don't can't interface here, can't do that. Africa didn't have those issues. So for them deploying technology, they embrace it. In fact, when you can't get a bank account because you don't have a national ID, they came up with their cryptocurrency, which is mobile minutes. And
Hmm.
using their cell phones, everybody has not one, two, or three cell phones. They all have many cell phones. We always joke when we go to dinner, we just need a seat for everybody's cell phones. But everybody uses cell phones. And so they didn't have banking. So the cell phone companies came up with mobile minutes. So $1 equals 1 minute, whatever
Yeah.
denomination that you're in. And you can pay anyone's tab anywhere that they
Hmm.
call you. So let's say I'm at the grocery store, I forget my wallet. I call you, say, hey, I forgot my wallet. Can you please send mobile minutes to the grocery store? Because
Hmm.
there are groceries, everybody has a till number, and you're like, yeah, sure. You text it, and my bills pay. I walk out. Like you can't do that in America. You'd have to Venmo or something, but they have to have Venmo. It just doesn't work. So what we liked about Africa is they were willing to deploy big tech quickly because they don't have that legacy. And I'll tell you, Africa now has some of the most leading tech because
Yeah.
of that. And Uganda, we started Uganda with the taxation. They are the first country in the world to have a tax system where the local government taxation and the federal government taxation has been consolidated. We don't do it here in the States.
Yeah.
That's very divided. Everything is in one place. So it's the start of e-government, which I applaud them for that.
Wow. And w not to deviate a little bit, what makes, let's say, the US aspect, right? Like, I do agree there's a lot of legacy, but if we're so much ahead in tech, specifically, in the Valley, Silicon Valley, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we call it. What's causing it to be like not being where Africa is in terms of some things? Like they're like quickly implemented, make it happen. You did mention legacy. Do you think there's other things that actually come into place that Africa doesn't have, that like bureaucracy, or whether like landscape is different in terms of culture of implementation or
Yeah.
geopolitics?
Yeah. The geopolitics is interesting. They're tired of debt, right? So
Hmm.
they have World Bank, IMF, China. Everybody has debt, and they're drowning in debt. So
Hmm.
anything they can do to reduce that debt, they have to grow their middle income. So their middle incomes aren't as big as ours. right? And they have to grow that middle income because, as we know in economics, as you grow the middle income, you create a bigger tax revenue base, which
Yeah.
then you can then put towards what the country needs most. So they're desperate to reduce debt because they're drowning in it, and they're desperate to become sovereign nations. So they're kind of digging out over the last 60 years. So when they became independent, people all came in like, oh, we'll build your airport for debt. We'll build your railroad for debt. We'll
Yeah.
build, build, build. And now it's a bit of a mess. So
Yeah.
they're eager to get from under the weight of debt so that they can run their countries the way they see fit. And Geo, look, they're still
Yeah.
all the influences are still over there now trying to exploit Africa for their carbon related credits and natural resources
Hmm.
and mining all the precious rare earth minerals. So that's the next exploitation happening. And we're like, you got to stop. You got to own this. You got to control this. Don't let people come in and give you the dog and pony show and then just
Yeah.
have debt. And the other thing we see over there is I think we're one of the only companies as when we go into a country, we only hire within
Hmm.
that country and bring everyone up to speed. And if they don't know technology or if they don't aren't up to speed on the latest, greatest, and we train them. And what we see is a lot of foreign companies come in, bring their foreign workers, do the job, take the minerals, whatever they're going to do, and then
Yeah.
leave, and they have nothing. They're not any better off. So we're all about lifting white climbing, whether
Mm.
it's women, men, whatever it is. We want
Yeah.
to be able to leave behind very strong, strong educated. And they're very educated. Africans are very
Yeah.
educated. They all got masters, PhDs. They're more educated than me. Just job opportunities aren't there.
And so just to pivot a little bit, so let's go back to the early phase of RippleNami a little bit. So when you
Mm-hmm.
joined as the CEO and chairman,
Mm.
what was the stake, the challenges that you faced when you start off? Like, because what I want to do is I want to dive into how did the rental tax compliance system that you guys are building, how did you guys even arrive to that? And then what does that entail? A little bit deeper, if that's okay with
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. So we actually started out, and I wasn't in the very beginning. There was two other guys in the beginning, and they started out by saying, "Look, there is a propensity of data. We have data. We have so much data, and maybe 1% is used. What if we could grab that data and make it informational back to whoever it is?" And it started out with mapping. And the premise was, look, in an emergency, let's take the hurricane right now.
Mhm.
When an emergency happens, FEMA comes in and they bring a whole bunch of people in, but those people don't even know where they are, what they're doing. They don't know the landscape. They don't know anything. And emergency management systems are very command and control,
Mhm.
meaning that you're a aid worker and you're going to go into whatever place you're in, and I'm going to report to a
Yeah.
command center. The command center then will put it on a map, populate it, and then communicate out. We're like, what if that person could take a picture of the fire and put it on a map and
Yeah.
everyone could see it real time? Like, why can't we do that? Still cannot do it today. So we tried to work in the emergency management space, and we quickly found out there's different tiers of emergency management. Tier one, FEMA, they use this big clunky command and control center. Tier two and three and four, those guys have no money. So we're like,
Mhm.
okay, well, this is not going to work for us. But what we did is we built a mapping system to where you could map your world. So what's important to you is not important to me. And think about it like when you want to go to Starbucks and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, give me the directions to Starbucks. I can't say, oh, and also give me the instructions to the bank, a hotel, and maybe three other points. So we
Yeah.
wanted to be able to real quickly be able to bring that data in, and then you can map your world. So one of the things we did is we did a demo in the Congo, and we had there's so much open source data. It's amazing. We pulled in everything there is about Congo, where their mines are, where their forests are, their transportation, their water lines, you name it, everything. We
Wow.
digitized it on a map, and we showed it to the Congolese government. We said, look, this is your country. And then we overlaid it with conflicts. Where are all the conflicts?
Yeah.
And you could see very clearly all the conflicts were, of course, where all the gold mines were and the diamond mines. And they're like, we need this to do our job. Like, we can't even
Yeah.
do a budget. We just have no traceability. We have no transparency into what we have. So that's kind of how it started. And we got a call from somebody that said, hey, can you do it in taxation? And we never say no because we were a startup way back then. We're like, sure, data is data to us. It doesn't matter if
Yeah.
it's person, place, or thing. And our COO, Amy Johnson, becomes a expert at every subject matter. So she knows everything about cows. She knows everything about climate. She knows everything about tax. She reads textbooks. She does everything. She educates herself. So she's like, yeah, we can do this. And our development team actually came in from FICO. And, FICO, we give scores,
Yeah.
right? So they don't have FICO. And so we said, well, can we give everyone a score based upon their compliance or not? And they're like, yeah, we can. So that's where the AI came in. So that's how we got into taxation, not by choice, never set out to be like, but because it's just big data that
Yeah.
needed to be organized, sorted, matched, analyzed, fed back.
Yeah.
That's why we got into taxation. Same, we did, any opportunity comes along, we look at it honestly and say, can we add value? Yes or no? And there's things we pass on. There's a lot of projects we pass on. But that was one of those ones where like, tax, we all don't like to pay taxes. Right?
Yeah.
We're like, oh, do we really want to be on this side of the house? And we said, you know what? It's the right thing to do for our country. So that's
Wow.
how we got into taxation.
And so now is it only in how many countries have you guys expanded that you call it RTCS, right?
Our tax, yeah, RippleNami
RTAX.
tax compliance system. We're in about 7 right now, and we're
Nice.
in. It's like once someone has it, and President Museveni in Uganda, he is a big thought leader, and he said, "I we need this," and I'm like, "Okay, you'll be the first," and he goes, "Good." And then once the other countries see it works, they're like, "What are you doing? I want that." So we're talking to 7 active countries right now as well. And then we
Wow.
just were asked to go over to Asia to do the same thing. So to us, it doesn't matter. Data is data.
Yeah.
Inputs are all over, and some inputs are, as you know, very sophisticated, like we can do an API. Some are paper based, so we got to scan it in. And
Yeah.
we went to Uganda's got the oldest tax system, oldest tax authority in Africa. And then we're also in Gambia, just to do a dichotomy. They're the newest, and
Wow.
everything's on paper. So
I am
it's just totally different, but still data. We just got to push it in somehow.
you did mention to me when we had our conversation, like intro call, the USB part. They store
Mm-hmm.
everything. What was that? Can
Well,
you?
that's in a country in Central Africa. I won't say the country. So I
Mm,
said, "Where's the data stored?" And this is one
yeah.
we passed on because it was complicated. It's a very large country. And they're like, "Oh, we put it in the box." I'm like, "Okay, what's the box?" That's a computer. And I said, "Well, how do you get it from province to province?" And they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, we use the stick." And I'm like, "What's the stick?" And that was USB. And I'm like, "How do you get it?" And they're like, "Oh, we put it on the back of a motorcycle. Guy brings it from the back of a motorcycle, and they bring the sticks in every month, and then we upload that into our federal tax system."
Wow.
I was like, "Okay." So you're either going to be paper based, stick based, box based, or sophisticated. Like Uganda is sophisticated. They have all their data. The ministries at least have databases. Um, may not be the same database, but it's still data that we can manipulate, pull in, and match. Because no one uses.
Yeah.
That's the other problem. Like we have social security numbers here that everything's tied to. Not in Africa. Some countries they have national IDs and fairly new,
Yeah.
and not most ministries don't use the national ID. They use their own ID. So you think about the Ministry of Local Government has their local ID. They use the Minister of Finance uses the tax ID number. The Minister of
Wow.
Water uses the phone number. Everybody uses a different ID. So bringing that in, that data matching is super complicated, and we get millions and millions and millions of lines of code. So you have to bring that in and match it, and then you have to match it with confidence, and that's where the FICO scoring kind of methodology came in. I had to say, okay, we matched X amount of elements. We feel 100% confident that all these data points and all these properties point back to this one person. Because we pull in
Wow.
business records, water and sewage, electricity, you name it. We pull in everything because it's got to be at the end of the day when the tax authority issues an assessment, it's got to be defendable, right, in court.
Yeah.
So if they say, "Oh, no one rent it, I didn't rent that out for a year," then they pull the
Yeah.
water records. Like, well, you had water coming through the whole year, so
So,
kind of
so
hide
in a,
to hide, hard to hide.
wow. And so in summary, like the whole unification of the data is
Mhm.
what's basically you guys are driving, right? Like you guys are like, hey,
Yep,
let's get the 360 information about
yep,
this property A that this
yep.
person is selling. So when you see that, right? So let's say today individuals are renting the property, they're able to tax, you guys are with your system able to tax it, right? So you have this
Mhm.
amazing market. Where do you see this technology specifically? Because we talk about the rental tax compliance system that you have built.
Right,
Where do you
right.
see it going? Do you see it expanding into different, I guess, verticals, like,
Yeah.
different
So,
tax systems? Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, I don't even need tax systems. You think about our back end never changes, whether it's a cow or a crop. The back end of data matching, data
Yeah.
analytics, data visualization, and then feeding it back in a that back end never changes.
Yeah.
Just what data points we're pulling in and what are we trying to solve. So the only thing we ever change is the front end. The back end never changes. So to us, person, place, or thing, we don't care. We can digitize it. And we'd like to pull together disparate data silos to solve for an ecosystem problem,
Hmm.
right? So, in like, let's talk livestock, cows.
Yeah.
A bank came to us and said, "Hey, we want to give micro lending to pastoral farmers, but they don't have an ID. We don't know how many cows they own. We don't know their vets. Can you pull that together?" So we did. So we matched the cow to the person digitally, gave them a digital wallet. The veterinarian came in, gave the vaccination. Now that cow has a healthcare record. Once they get through their feeding stage, then they go to a feed lot to get fattened up. So the feed lot could say, "Oh, this is a cow that doesn't have a diseases, it's had all these vaccinations." They buy the cow from the pastoral farmer. That farmer now in their digital wallet shows that they sold their 10 cows for whatever, $100 each. So now they have $1,000. The bank will give them microloan.
Because I do have your app open, by the way, on your site.
Oh,
And I'm
okay.
like, so it's like the vaccination, the
Yeah.
treatment, that moves with
Yeah.
livestock.
Yeah.
How like, I have a lot of questions, so I don't know which one would be
Sure.
the right one to ask.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about tracking a thing like vaccination, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, I'm assuming the fact there are data challenges, right?
Oh,
Reporting
absolutely.
challenges, right? So we're not dealing in a country which is more structured, not to downplay anything, but I'm trying to understand, it's like,
Yep.
how do you go about doing that? Like, I see something, it's like, hey, if this cow is infected or not, or has any disease, or the movement. And so you have multiple, let me premise my question. Multiple moving parts, multiple data tracking. How did you go about building such thing that is now really having a big impact in Africa that you're doing?
Yeah. So what we did, so each cow has an RFID code, right? They all get
Hmm.
tagged. There's real sophisticated ones now that can actually, you don't need to go up and scan it. But back then we didn't, we had the scanning. So we
Hmm.
had the scanner. We worked with the RFID data provider, and the scanner got scanned. And then the veterinarian had our app and would then just scan in the vaccinations they were giving. They scan the cow, scan the shots, and just like you would go into when you go to the doctor or the hospital, right? They scan your bracelet, the whole bit, right? They
Yeah.
scan your hospital bracelet, then they scan the aspirin they gave you, the toothbrush, whatever they gave you from a billing perspective. Well, we had it all scanned in from a healthcare record standpoint. So it's the same thing as a human, just using RFID. And so our apps are both offline and online capability. So when they're out in the bush, um, they can scan everything in, and then when they get back to internet, it uploads.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
Super,
so everything gets
super.
captured in the app, and then we also have it so it's there's no we call it fat fingering, so we don't want people to actually have to type stuff in. So it's all drop down menus. So all vaccinations, we know exactly what they are. They can just drop down pick. So it's very quick. They do this because they do like we put out radio ads that bring your cows to this area because you're going to get vaccinated for whatever foot and mouth disease, and then everybody would show up, 1,000 cows, and you're like, oh, that's overwhelming. Like we had to
Wow.
think through that kind of issues. Like first off, how do you communicate we're coming? Second off, how
Yeah.
do you communicate what we're doing? You have to work with the county, you have to work with the livestock, you have to work with the agriculture, you have to work with so many different parties, and it's super complicated, but we make it real easy. We make it a simple app. But that's where our superpower, Amy Johnson, comes in and like learns everything about a cow. You're like, why are you reading veterinarian books? She goes, because I need to know everything about a cow.
Wow. And so the customer for this is so is it would you say is it two-sided? Like you work with the banks to make it easier? Like how like I'm just trying to
Yes. So the
understand what's the
bank,
business?
yeah, the business model on that one, the bank employed us and we worked very closely with the livestock commissioner.
Oh,
So it was twofold with the veterinarian association. So, but the bank paid the bills, they paid the invoice, but we had to work with all those other parties because they had to train up to speed and see benefit in it. And our whole thing is like, look, I think there's only one or two countries that can export meat in Africa because they don't have proper healthcare records. So our whole
wow.
goal is like they have cows are like sacred. They love their cows. They have giant cows, and it's so why can't we export that meat? And so we had to have European traceability. So they do now. Whether they export or not, I think the demand is so high within country. But there are some countries we couldn't do it because they didn't want it.
Yeah.
And South Africa was one of them. And they have a terrible problem with foot and mouth disease. So we could actually quarantine those cows very quickly to say, digitally, you can say these cows need to go there and they could push them off versus the ones that weren't affected. But we could not work with the South African government. So there's some governments we just can't work with. They don't really want change. They like the way it is.
Do you think that that might change their opinion or their execution if you have expanded to other countries? You know, sometimes peer, oh wow, really?
No, no. Some countries you're not going to be able to work in. The president, industries. I tried.
Hmm.
They were yelling and screaming at me, and I'm like about diversity, and I'm like, it's an app. I don't discriminate. It was a very odd conversation, so we walked away and wished them luck.
So just want to talk a little bit more about the data, right? So assuming the fact that you guys are expanding into multiple countries, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And you have two different apps for livestock, one is for the tax system. The data privacy, I guess. My question is around that. Who owns the data? Is RippleNami like the meta? Like, hey, we own it? Or is it like, hey, we're working with these partners? Or is it distributed blockchain? Because I know there's blockchain also involved. So what if that is stored? Like, there are many ways to go around it. So it's an open-ended
Yeah,
question.
yeah. So we comply with GDPR, the European
Yeah.
Privacy Act. We adhere to whatever the country wants. So in Uganda, Gambia, usually tax information, man, we do not want to store that offsite. So we
Yeah.
actually store that in a national data center that they parse off for us.
Right.
Um, so it depends on the type of data. When we did food security during COVID, didn't matter. Like who cares? Livestock didn't matter.
Yeah.
Uh, tax information matters. Financial information matters. So it depends on the type of data and what the requirements are from the country of where we store it. So there's not AWS. I think only has one
Yeah.
site in South Africa. That's it.
Hmm.
There's data centers popping up here and there, but not on a scale. So any real data that is not necessarily need to be stored within a country will be stored in AWS government in London. That's where we keep, that's the closest AWS that we have so that's closest to Africa. And then the rest will store within their data center. If they have a data center, there's some countries that don't have a data center. So then we just make sure that GDPR is applied. As far as who owns the data, the government owns the data. It's their data. We don't own it.
Hmm. So do you think like about the data center aspect that because since you have, I'm assuming the fact that this massive data around how the structure, the building, the properties, right? So you have a lay of the land, literally, understanding around that. Do
Mm-hmm.
you think is something that RippleNami, not today, maybe tomorrow, maybe the after tomorrow future, right? Plans to collaborate in bringing data center? Because what I'm hearing, one thing is like, ooh, what do you mean one data center? Africa's very big. Like in the US, we have broken up by different zones and so forth, right?
Right.
Would you see there is a future for RippleNami to go a bit further in tech and be like, let's work with a partner, bring them from the US or Europe, and establish a data center? Since you guys
Yeah.
know, so it's like a government initiative, RippleNami initiative, and this third party initiative. Do you see that future?
Absolutely. We already do it. We do it. So we partner with a company called Raxio. It's actually a company based out in New York, but they're putting data centers throughout Africa. And they actually have one in Uganda, and they're putting one in Congo. And we asked, so we do partner with that. So when we do see a hole like that, we find it, can we build it? Can we buy it? Or can we partner?
Yeah.
And if we can partner, we're always going to partner first. If we have to build it, we reluctantly build it. But we usually buy, build, or acquire. So those are kind of the strategies we deploy. So we do partner with them when necessary, but really let the government, because then that's a whole nother
Yeah.
process. We don't look. We're data
Yeah.
geeks. We like big data. We don't want to get into hardware. We really don't. That's not our strength.
That's fair. That's so impressive. The stuff that you're telling me, I'm like in awe. I'm just loving this. So going back to the rental tax compliance system that you guys have built, what does the future looks like now? We did like expanding more different verticals. Like you did mention that
Yep.
Hazel data.
Yep.
What's the next? Yeah. Mhm.
So what we see just on property related alone, you think about how, so when you pay a ground rate or a property tax, just like we do in the States, that goes to the local government.
Yeah.
And their systems are usually in a book. I like to write down in a book, or it's very archaic. So that will be the next vertical. We built the system so it's modular. So whatever tax they want to do next, it's just in another tab. That's how it was built. So we see the rental income is the lowest hanging fruit on taxation, and it's low. And people are collecting less than 0.01%. I mean, it's so low.
Mhm.
Property tax, the local governments are pretty good because that includes your trash, electricity, that includes utilities that they can cut off,
Yeah.
but they still aren't collecting it at the level they should be. And then you think about, then there's hotel tax. There's so many taxes related to
Yeah.
properties. You're just like, we could just tick them off. So we built it so it's modular right now. We'll probably in the implementation we're doing now, I won't say the country right now, but we'll probably do the property taxation, which is the local government side, because we have all the data. It's already there. It's super simple just to like, hey, here you go.
Yeah.
So, why recreate the wheel twice? Because every local government has its own system.
Mhm.
So we can give them a simple application and they can do their same job. And that feeds all into that. Think of it, the start of e-government.
Wow. That's so cool. And so shifting a little bit, I want to be also mindful of time.
Mhm.
Um, Technology. I know you guys are have this amazing system. It's powering so many countries. You guys expanding. Two, I think you did mention about big data. And you did mention AI. I want to
Mhm.
dive into AI because everybody
Mm,
talks about it these days. Like I
I
go to the
know.
store, I'm
Yeah.
like, hey, how you doing? They're like, hey, AI. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
down to that point.
Right.
How do you see specifically these foundation models like Gemini or GPTs? They're popping up
Hmm.
every day. How do you see them impacting RippleNami's business, its system that you guys have built? Do you think it's gonna make it production faster? Will the execution be more easy for you guys to do it? Or how do you see the use cases, I guess, in your
Yeah.
vertical?
So we already use AI. We've been using, so AI has been around for 67 years for those that need a history lesson. It's been around a long time. We've been using it a long time. It's just now mainstream. So everyone's got your chat GPT, which, oh, by the way, I heard the story. I haven't verified it, but they told me Kenyans were the ones that programmed all of chat GPT
Oh, really?
using the dark web. So that is a fact I would like to confirm if anyone can confirm that for me. But I was like, what? I didn't know that. And that makes sense that they use AI all the time. So we've been teaching them. I don't think from RippleNami it will make a difference to us because we already use it. We use it to analyze the data, like big, think about how many millions and millions and millions of data set, right? I have to have AI to come in and organize it and give me the feedback I need. So it's not going to help us out any because we already use it. What we are doing is educating everyone when we go about just what it is and like showing them from a day to day how they can use it. So let me talk about our driver. Our driver in one country, he teaches Arabic he's a teacher and a driver. So he
Yeah.
teaches Arabic. And I'm like, have you ever used ChatGPT? And he goes, what is this ChatGPT? So I showed him. He's like, oh my God. He goes, does it do translation? I'm like, it does it everything. So now he's so every time I get in the car with him, he's like, Jay, I use ChatGPT. I did this, I did this. And I'm like, so we're educating them about here's this cool free app that you can use and make your life better. Well,
Yes.
we're actually using it to educate the folks on how to do their daily lives or their jobs or whatever they're trying to do quicker. We've introduced it to the government because they're like, we'd really like to have a logo and brand this different way. Like, well, let's just ask ChatGPT. And we're sitting there waiting for a meeting. And the guy's like, what are you talking about? So we put up the app and Amy's like, here, what colors do you like? He goes, I like purple and whatever green. And so we said, create this app, create a logo for this company doing this. And he's like, okay. So it's to us, that's the enlightenment we see. So we whatever we learned here, whatever we have, we bring it to Africa. And
Nice.
most of them know about it, but great part, there's a lot
Yeah.
that it's eye opening from even student. We talked to a lot of university, a lot of students, just about what's the latest and greatest. So that's what we're seeing is the enlightenment. They're like, wow, that's amazing.
Nice.
Cybersecurity is another one. We're
Yeah.
constantly, we're very much on the cybersecurity side of protecting data, and we have to educate usually the technology departments on how to parse data, how to keep it out. And when we first went into one country, I won't say the name, we said, hey, give us some space in your rack in
Hmm.
the data center, and they just gave us everything. We're like, no, 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 no. We put the blinders up, and we said, look, this is how you divvy out the data in data centers and how you do it. And like, oh, okay, thank you for letting us know. And that was a very sophisticated country.
Wow. I do believe like I think the technology where we are at with AI, like all these LLMs, I think like where you guys are operating, I think it might even help you scale. Like think about the paper data that you guys have, right? For the countries you're going to. You just feed in,
Yeah.
it
Mm-hmm.
does everything, and then you
Well,
guys are like,
OCR
yeah.
does that, right? OCR has
Yeah.
always done that. I will say I'm on a board of an AI with empathy company.
Oh,
Yeah, it's super cool called Parsley 360. You probably should have her on your a podcast. Cheryl is the CEO. And what it's using, it's AI for good. And
hmm.
it's for to help employee optimization and pocket coaches and everything else. But it's scarily how much empathy AI can have when trained appropriately. So we're trying to turn AI on a head. It's not all bad. It's not take over the world. But actually, people um, function in their jobs and point out, and it has long term and short term memory. So like you can take it with you. You leave a company, and they're like, "This problem with my boss," whatever you're telling AI, and the pocket coach, her name is Tulsi. She's gonna go, oh, remember last year we had that same issue, and we did this. So why don't we try something? It's just
Wow.
very cool, very cool.
What's the name of the company you said?
It's called Parsley 360. So you should get,
Parsley
and I'll connect
360.
you to Cheryl. And so I
Wow.
just I just joined the board. So
This
it's
is, this
pretty cool.
wow. I'll tell you, like there were some things I was trying, I can't name, but we could actually predict the divorce rate. And we were trying to sell I guess I don't know how much I can even mention. But long story short, you can actually predict, and it was so accurate. My mom was like, geez, what are you trying to do? I'm like, it's just data. I don't know what I can do. I want this is crazy. It was around like data segmentation, understanding, who young couples and all that. And I was like, oh, they want to advertise. What can I do?
Right.
Yeah, that's not a very good example for myself, but I want to talk about the last piece of technology, and then I want to open up towards your thought set of like leadership, because looking at your career, Jay, it's very inspiring to me personally. I'm
Thank
definitely
you.
sure it should be inspiring to many women out there. But before I jump into that, um, blockchain. It's
Mm-hmm.
been there around. I remember people throwing word around blockchain or coffee maker for that matter, right? Where do you see the technology? Because you're in that space,
Yeah. Yeah.
integrating, building from zero to
Mm-hmm.
one. What is your take on that?
Yeah. So I think blockchain is okay for now. I don't think it's the end all. I haven't dug into the quantum computing, but it's not fast. And they try to
Hmm.
make it fast, but it's not. It who cares? It's an audit trail to me, right? I used to be an auditor, so it just securely puts all the auditor, the audit stamps on it all the way through one piece of data through an entire system. Okay, cool. I've seen it being used a lot in climate, but if you still are getting crappy data in, so then it's validating crappy data. Like, who cares? To me, it's not the end all. I'm a big visual person, so seeing is believing. I like to see videos and like real
Yeah.
life feeds and sensor data. I like to see that pinging, that real time data, rather than a bunch of audit trails coming through. So they are using it a lot in climate.
Mhm.
We only use it when it's absolutely necessary. But I do think quantum computing is coming up. And so we say, look, we don't care what the underlying technology is. We'll sit it, use it for as long as it's there. But when there's something new, we can replace it out. So that's always our strategy is we always want to be on the top of the cutting edge. I don't want to lay down and bet like, oh, we're only going to use Ethereum
Yeah.
or Hyperledger or anything else. We looked at them all.
Yeah.
We had picked Hyperledger, but at the end of the day, I think there's going to be something bigger, faster.
Yeah. I have the same thoughts that what you have. I do feel like blockchain is great, but depends on the use cases and do you want to use it. It's good for validation. The question is, what are you validating?
Right.
Comes back to the data. So I'm like,
Right. It's
okay.
all the data. So if the data is, if you have junk data, you're going to have junk
Oh,
results. Yeah.
it's like what
Right.
what are you validating? If you're
Exactly.
validating noise that existed here,
Yeah.
great job.
Exactly. Yeah, right, right. So that's how I see it because I'm a old tried and true auditor. So that to me is like, yeah, but if the data's wrong, great. I have a stamp that says it's right.
Yeah, no. This is interesting. So my last part, I always ask all of my guests, Jay, try to be thoughtful and advise or something. Since I have you, so I think I cannot give a one word. I see your career. You've done multiple M&A. You were CEO for United Health. Then you sold another company, and it's a once for me. It's an aspirational. Like I am inspired. I'm like, geez, I want to be there, right? So that's the
Okay.
you have a life fan over here, and I'm sure there are plenty of other people out there, and also women in tech or in business, looking up to you. You were a TEDx speaker. I don't know, Jay. Like, what could you say is like if people want to replicate the same success, the authority, the career path, the stuff that you're doing with impact with RippleNavi across all of Africa, that's a mouthful.
Yep.
What would you like? I don't know. What you tell me, what should I ask you? Like, there's
Yeah.
so much to unpack from you.
Yeah. So I would say, look, I didn't have a plan. I knew I had an accounting background, right? Because I figured if you know the numbers, you can rule the world, right? That was my whole goal. I'm going to be a CEO. I was in oil and gas. I was in oil and gas in the 1980s, mid 80s, when the price dropped to $12 a barrel is the day I started, Pennzoil. So they're like, you're the cheapest person. We've laid off 500 people. You're in charge. So what I've always done and what I tell everyone that I help mentor is look at your career in 5 year increments. Where do you want to be in 5 years? What is the skill set you need to get there? And it may be 3 years now, but to me, it was always 5 years. Like 5 years, I want to be a controller. 5 years, I want to be a CFO. Next 5 years, VP. I work my way up, or VP and then CFO and then CEO. So I always had a 5 year plan. And some of the jobs I had were terrible. I will tell you, I Forrest Gump my way through most of this because I needed a job. I had a daughter and had a feed. So it was like, I got to get a job, but I got to get a job that I can get behind. So I went oil and gas and mining just because that was what I grew up doing in
Yeah.
Texas. When I moved out here, I joined a startup. I had been a $1 billion company. So I joined a startup and I was like, what? And I'm like, who's going to do AP? And they're like, you're going to do it. I'm like, what is, I don't know how to do that. So I put myself in a position after being at large companies, then going to a very small, I was like the third person hired and had to like write policy and procedure. So I'm like, but where's the policy and procedure department? They're like, you're the policy. I'm like, oh my God. So that startup went really well. And I'm like, oh, that was easy. So now I know at the biggest level what it should look like, and I know how to build it from a small level. And then mergers and acquisition was my godsend because I didn't know anything about it. And I remember going on an interview and I was like, oh, I'm interviewing for a head of M&A for a
Yeah.
healthcare company. So I got a book. I still have that book, Mergers and Acquisitions. And I'm like, what do I ask? What questions? And this is a funny story. So the company that I was interviewing with had a shareholders meeting. And I used to go to shareholders meeting at Pennzoil and the big companies, and they were big. There were hundreds and hundreds of people. I show up at the shareholder meeting a week before my interview, and it is only the board and
Mm.
maybe two shareholders. And so I had to introduce myself because I was like, "You're going to see me next week." So I went up, introduced myself to CFO. I'm like, "Hi, my name is Jay." He goes, "Oh, thank you for being a shareholder." I'm like, "Actually, not a shareholder. I'm actually interviewing with you next week." And I just wanted to hear. And he's like, "Well, you got the job because you did this." And I'm like, "Oh." So just put yourself out there. And I remember, like, I didn't know anything about M&A, and I called all the investment bankers that I was working with. I'm like, "Can you guys help me?" I go,
Yeah.
"I'm very organized. I'll be able to figure this out, but can you help me organize and just give me the lingo and the language?" It's like, you kind of fake it till you make it. But I would
Yeah.
say every opportunity you take, you got to have that feeling of, how am I going to pull this off? Because the ones that you're comfortable with, your jobs that you take that you're like, no problem, do it in my sleep, not the right
Yeah.
job, not a stretch at all. So take that job in your gut. You're like, oh, if I can do this, those are the best opportunities, and you'll grow into it and you'll make it your own. So from my accounting background, I did audit, all that good stuff. So I had a good core on finance. And then in M&A, I had to live with the deal and make sure it made its synergy. So I had the operation experience. So it really helped me shape who I was. And there was terrible situations. I've had terrible companies. They went bankrupt, DOJ investigation, like terrible experiences. But what you do is in those companies, you take the good,
Yeah.
never repeat the bad. And I had terrible board members. I had terrible CEO. I had all kinds of characters. But again, you take the good and leave the bad, and you treat people with respect. And my mom always told us that you treat the janitor to the president the same,
Yeah.
because you never know when that janitor is going to be the president, right? So treat always people with respect. And I also will tell the younger generation, cut out these labels. Everybody's labeling themselves like, I'm this, I'm that, I can't. I Stop it. Labels equal limits.
Yeah.
You can do anything you want. You have the power. Everything's inside. Yeah, there's elements, they're going to push you down, whatever. You think
Yeah.
we were successful in Africa out of the gate? No, we failed so many times until we got the right partners and the right structure. And like we always walked away at 10 times. So, but you have to like keep being determined, and don't, if you get knocked down, that's okay. Pick yourself up. And I had a great boss once. He goes, Jay, make a decision. 50% of the time, you'll be right. Just make a decision. So he would always tell me that. I'm like, okay, go with your gut. You know what's right, wrong. Stretch yourself and make sure that you're looking at your career in 5 year increments and where you want to go. And then make sure you get that skill set so you can make it
Yeah.
to the next leap. And we're real big. I'm also on a board of a STEM for women in STEM.
Hmm.
And what I find in these women, and we just went global, which is cool. It's called Athena.
Nice.
And we just went into Zambia and Uganda. And it's all about women empowerment. And again, that's a label, but I just to provide people confidence. So I look at pockets of populations of people that need help, and to give them the confidence to do what they already have inside, but they just need that push. So we support foster care kids. It's, again, terrible situation, man. They just were born in the wrong family, orphans, and women. So those kind of are as a corporation, that's what we look at supporting. And all my C-level people are women, not by chance, but and I used to joke. I said, God, I'd love to hire single moms, because I was a single
Yeah.
mom. And they're like,
Yeah.
why do you hire single moms? I'm like, because we don't have time to mess around during the day. We have to get in, do our job, go home, get that, take care of our child and everything, and then we go
Yeah.
back to work. So I mean, the hardest workers are those that are the most desperate or the most needs. The ones that come in and they give me their Ivy League resume and blah blah blah, and I'm like, no, thank you,
Oh,
no, thank you.
yeah.
You don't know a hard life. We like people that have that are rough around the edges, that are eager to learn, and we will give you any opportunity. And we do this with all the people we hire in other countries. We say, where do you want to be? And we have a great story. I won't go into it, but a great story I can tell you offline about somebody that started at the very bottom. And he goes, I want to learn those computers. So we put
Oh,
him through computer class. He goes, I'm going to get this license, this license. We did it. And now he's running a implementation at a country.
wow.
Yeah. So never, don't label yourself. Figure out what your plan is. And you're not going to know. Like I didn't have a plan that I wanted to be a CEO of a company that works in Africa. Never part of the plan. The company wasn't even supposed to be working in Africa. So I always say, people are like, where are you guys going to be in 5 years? I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know where we're going to morph to. I know we have big data. I know we manage it very well and we can feed it back so it
Yeah.
becomes informational. Where are we going to end up? I don't know. That's a journey. That's part of it. So the 5 year plans, like 5 year plans as far as a company level, because you're working in different countries,
Yeah.
sales doesn't work the way it's all relationship based. So for the younger generation, stop labeling yourself. The confidence is within you. Figure out what your plan is. Find people that are mentors to you, and it doesn't have to be within the company, but surround yourself with people that are honest
Yeah.
and push you.
Wow. This,
So yeah, that's what I would say to this next generation. Like I came from the generation, put your head in, show up, work 8 hours, work harder, you know. Uh, next generation, it's a different flavor.
yeah.
Um, and do something big. Like what's the legacy you're going to leave behind? Think about it in that way. Yeah, you can make money all day long, but what is it that you're going to leave behind that you're proud of? That to me is the most important.
This, I think, is the best. This needs to be hung for me, at least somewhere.
Yeah.
You were on point, Jay. I know a lot of people. I know a single mom as well, and they have these labels, and I'm always trying to push them. Like, hey, doesn't matter. Do it today. Doesn't matter because I will tell you my personal story, and I will not take more of your time then. But my personal story, when I started my podcast, I was like, I have to do it. I have to start from scratch. Oh, and I'm like, you know what? When I'm going to be 10 years later looking at it, I'll be like, I wish I did it.
Mhm.
And you just start. You don't know where you're headed. You learn along the way. You see what sticks. You just try it. And 50% of life will have no. But if you don't try it, you definitely will have no. And so I just totally resonate with what you're saying. Oh my God, this is amazing, Jay. I will
Great.
again, we will have a second podcast
Yes.
for those who are listening. That'll be more in carbon credits one, which will be very
Yeah.
exciting and very
Very.
educational for everybody and for myself as well. So thank you, Jay.
You're
Looking forward
welcome.
to having you again as well.
Great. Thank you very much.